Okay, everyone. As Jenny said, I have the truly daunting task of synthesizing and summarizing the many remarkable events that have transpired today. Given the fact that we have dozens of world experts here in their respective areas, I can't possibly do that justice. But there are a few thoughts that I'd like to share, having looked at the experience to date. I'd like to first point out that one of the reasons we're here, one of the key reasons, is that there's been such extraordinary advances that have transpired in this field over one patient's lifetime. I mean, we literally have thousands of patients in Joslin that have had 50 more years of type 1 diabetes. We have several that have over 80 years of type 1 diabetes. And I would point out that it was only 60 years ago, we were still doing pituitary ablation for the treatment of diabetic retinopathy. It was only 50 years ago that the laser was started out and was going on. And really, that VEGF has been around only for 10 years in terms of an approved therapy. And so there's been just a remarkable speed of adjustment. You look at all the anti-VEGF studies that have come since in the last 10 years, that it's understandable how some of our endpoints may have not have kept up with the new and future needs of our evolving research. So that's the reason we need to reassess our staging endpoints as we've been doing today. Now, I think we heard the stage set beautifully in the morning about personal impact of the disease, the need for new approaches for structural and functional endpoints, the usefulness of consortium, which interestingly you heard at the beginning, has now come right back around to the end being very important. The emphasis on adding person with diabetes as a focus to the process. And again, then the regulatory aspects that were so kindly provided by Dr. Edelman, Wickstrom, and Dr. Chambers. So what did we learn? What did we accomplish today? First, to me, what's remarkable is you look out at the composition of the attendees, and alone that speaks to the importance and breadth of the mission. You have leaders in the government, academia, you have patient advocates, industry, all working together to see if we can move this field forward in a manner to take advantage of the advances that we've had and the advances that we want to have coming forward in the future. And to do that in the safest way possible and make sure that safety is included in that throughout. So, did we make progress in terms of what was pointed out by Dr. Levine is important this morning? Was this a catalyst? Well, I think seeing everybody together like this, certainly with the discussions as we've heard them reported, clearly this caused a lot of thoughtfulness, a lot of interaction, and new ideas coming forward. With regard to the fact we can't solve a problem that we haven't defined, that was, the ongoing staging project was part of that, but it was out of the staging project that we got various targets for what we were looking at today. And we started to have the need to have these endpoint definitions and considerations. And the fact that you can't find cures without studying the human condition, again, that was done in terms of a biorepository, but that's what we started to do today with outlining some of the clinical trials you've talked about. How do we look at the clinical condition for this? And then from what you heard from our group and others, if we have a platform type of approach to these studies, linking that with the biorepository, because then you have the very good characterization breadth, as well as some of these biomarkers that may be very useful. And finally, you can't just judge success unless you know what to measure. And I would say, and how to measure it and what counts towards measurement. We heard that from various folks who were kindly enlightened on those aspects by Dr. Chambers, and what I thought it was this very clear and detailed presentation of the end groups. And the breakup groups took on this huge task in a couple hours time total to go through this. So I am now going to break down in explicit detail everything that was said in each of the breakout groups. No, not at all. I'm not going to review each of them specifically, but what I think is important is they were all able to identify high impact targets. So it means there's something out there that's worth looking at. They all had potential endpoints that might be useful. Again, things would be worth looking at that might have impact on the road, are worth further study or the ability to do definitive studies if they can become a registrable endpoint. The clinical studies were identified that could move the area forward in an important way. But I think overall what we learned is that there was very important aspects to look at. And as Adam told us repetitively, we still have a lot to do. So we need to do a lot individually and together, not only in terms of refining these endpoints, but where we take that in the future. So when I think about these things, I think about what's needed now to assure further progress and success down the road. Well, first, we need to figure out how we can continue these efforts. And in that regard, we're in very good hands with the MTN Vision Initiative and the JDRF. And I think that bodes very, very well for continued emphasis and direction along this path. We need to know, is there still a perceived need? And I think clearly you heard from many of the groups a resounding yes. We have issues that are important that we need to look into. And then finally, sort of, will we dedicate the efforts needed to this end? And, you know, that means that there needs to be a commitment to working together, and we have to devote the time, effort, and money required to make this happen. And that's up to all of us in order to do that. But what I would remember is think back to 1968. That's the Early House Symposium. That was a gathering like this because we had diabetic eye disease, and we needed to know what new things could we do for it. And that was a group of folks that got together, and out of that came the DRS study, the ETDRS study, laser, which then has been useful still to this day, 50, 60 years later in varying degrees. I will point out that the initial studies there were really going to be about pituitary ablation. And there were a couple folks that were there named William P. Beetham and L.M. Aiello, dad and grandfather of mine, that were there. I said, hey, we have this laser thing, maybe we should look into that. And thus started the DRS study, which originally was going to actually have pituitary ablation as an arm, but that was dropped out because of surgical problems in doing studies. And now that's what we have. And now, years later from that, you know, we ended up with a treatment that prevented vision loss for literally hundreds of millions of people around the world. So just consider what might come from today's work. It's my strong belief that the benefits are likely to be well worth the efforts that will be required on everyone's behalf to bring our goals to fruition. So finally, I think we need to express our gratitude to the JTRF, the Mary Tyler Moore Vision Initiative, and the University of Michigan, both for being brave enough to ask me to participate, and also for their support in these efforts, which have been really wonderful. We should recognize the tireless leadership of Dr. Gardner and Dr. Sun that have made remarkable progress despite potentially difficult broad group of folks to manage. I put myself in that group and made all of our efforts far more effective and easier by defining the questions so well and giving us the tools we needed to try to stay focused on that. And we did not perfectly, but pretty well, I think. And finally, I think we owe a very special debt of gratitude to Dr. Levine for his exceptional foresight, dedication, and true passion towards facilitating efforts to preserve, restore, and protect vision of people with diabetes. I'm sure that the future of diabetic eye care, and more importantly, the lives of all persons with diabetes, will be far brighter as a result of this. And today, we took some of the first steps along this important journey. Thank you.